Hai
Good
kawan-kawan.
morning. Selamat
Yes.
pagi dan salam
Hai.
sejahtera saya ucapkan kepada para pentafsir dan kawan-kawan. Pada hari ini topik kita ialah
Today, Sam is over in KL. He's actually in my room, but due to recording issues, we've decided to record it separately.
I'm freeloading.
Yeah, he's technically freeloading off me for now. This place is in your hotel, by the way, Sam. Gotta make sure you pay. Wait, that makes it a hotel. Never mind. So I made a little bit of changes to the podcast, by the way. So before this, on Spotify, it says that we hold kopitiam discussions, but hopefully in a more understandable way. I've come to realize that kopitiam standards are quite high to look up to. So I've changed our description. So now we hold neo kopitiam discussions.
What the
Neo Kopitiam.
Neo Kopitiam.
Post Kopitiamalist.
Yeah. So more advanced, or at least the new age of
postmodern kopitiam.
discussions. Yes, a postmodern kopitiam.
Interpret
Ironically,
what a Kopitiam is differently.
yes. Ironically, none of us have coffee with us right now. I actually wanted to make coffee, but we didn't have time. But
Like a drop of milk.
I have a water bottle,
Good job.
a drop.
Not
Yeah.
anymore.
Okay. So, anyways, the topic that we're talking about today is about counter movements. So primarily, we're going to be talking about movements that react to another core movement that aims to achieve some sort of equal, like equal rights or justice. So conveniently, we're going to be talking about mostly certain strands of men's rights activism, as well as the All Lives Matter movement in America. So, since we've had proxy debates with a mutual of ours about the credibility of the All Lives Matter movement or the Black Lives Matter movement, we've decided, maybe we
He shall
should.
not be named.
Yeah, they shall not be named.
They or she.
Shit.
Busted.
Oh no.
Yeah, but so we're going to talk about it and see, evaluate the arguments that each side has to some extent, and then, see which side is more correct, at least. So it's easier for us to form opinions about this. Actually, I have kind of a weird question for you guys. Like, I was on Twitter recently, and then someone was like tweeting an opinion about Trump, and he's Malaysian, right? And like the replies this tweet got were all quite negative, that you shouldn't be opinionated about politics that goes on overseas, right? So like, I don't know, but at least in debater culture, we do it a lot. Like, we talk more about foreign politics than local politics. And I think it's sort of normal that everyone knows who Trump is and everyone has an opinion on Trump. At least most of the people around me have an opinion on Trump. But do you guys think it's wrong to like have an opinion about foreign politics?
Yeah, I think we all live in one single country and we should only care about Mahathir and whatever he does.
I consider myself a citizen of the world, nothing. I don't think so. For a couple of reasons, two mainly. Number one, like Chomsky or like Noam Chomsky once said, like linguist and activist Chomsky once said, America is like an elephant, right? And we're all, and almost every other country in the world is like your rodents and your snakes and your monkeys. The elephant is trampling around the forest. Anything the elephant does is likely going to affect the rodents and monkeys and snakes as well.
I was trying to discern if that was racist, but go on.
The point is they're smaller, okay? You can have like dignified small animals.
I
don't know. The dignified.
Oh no.
The point is the size, not the. God damn it! I'm going to be cancelled from this. All right. Let's see. You could have like smaller animals like the magpie or the glorious peacock or whatever majestic small animal you want, right? And whatever America does affects us all at the end of the day, because they're just like that big. But also number two, anything happening overseas often has parallels in our own country as well, right? Human history doesn't repeat itself, but it definitely rhymes. Same concept. We might not have the exact same problems as America, but the racial tension, the police brutality, unfair systems of governance, these are problems that Malaysia faces as well as America. And we can point at them and go, they're doing this wrong. But then after we get through the initial stage of pointing, we can go, actually, we're doing something quite similar. Shouldn't we also look at our own government as well?
Like literally, if we want to learn our system of governance, since it's sort of like a Westminster parliament, we should be learning how it's done in the UK and like sort of make parallels and which one has, I don't know, which one is more liberal, which one cares about human rights more, which one is more democratic to some extent. So I don't know. I do see value in like learning politics that goes on overseas. But anyways, I think I diverted a bit too much. But let's talk about counter movements, right? So what do you guys think a counter movement is? Like, how do we define them?
I mean, the word counter definitely means they're reactionary in nature, right? So like they probably react to some kind of change in like status quo or something. Or like what's currently happening now, they're trying to change something.
Right. So like in politics, we learn that two sides of we have like progressives as well as conservatives, right? So like conservatives, they're like different ends of the spectrum, how conservative you want to be. But basically you oppose the amount of change you have because you believe that status quo is much better. Like what's happening right now, it's much safer for things to stay the way they are than to change them. So is it fair to say that all counter movements are to some extent conservative?
I personally don't think so. Like, change can be good or bad. As much as the progressive story is that change always becomes for the better, there are some forms of social movements that aren't necessarily positive. Take, for example, the guns rights movement in America, where or the original meaning of I believe it's the Fifth Amendment was to essentially ensure that America had an army, right? But in recent years, the NRA and other gun lobbying groups have essentially expanded the meaning of the Constitution to mean the right to bear arms on a private, personal capacity and to use it to defend one's personal property and self. This diverts away from the status quo, or what was the status quo then. And after the Supreme Court essentially ruled in their favor, that's the new social change. In many ways, the movement to get more gun control and more gun regulation isn't a progressive movement. Well, it is progressive, but it is not. It is a return to a status quo before the gun right movement, and you could technically call that a counter movement. But a lot of the times when we talk about counter movements, on a practical sense, we're talking about reactions to liberal changes in society. So I'd say they're mostly conservative, but not necessarily.
Yeah. So I think like a good way, this was put to me by a friend of ours, Ian, you were on that call, by the way, was that you compare them by looking at their priorities. So, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement, they are justice-based, yet the All Lives Matter has like a rights-based sort of mentality. So the difference between this is that like one movement, they want to achieve justice. They point out that there is injustice that's happening right now and we need to fix that. Then we have All Lives Matter movements that have a very rights-based concept of society. So they think that if you are to get more rights, it comes at my expense to some extent. Like, I'm pretty sure we can see that in other forms of counter movements. Like if we look at men's rights activists, when people argue, yes, women are being systematically oppressed, or like there's a power imbalance between men and women all around the world, and then men go like, oh yeah, but you automatically get the kid if we divorce, or like men get raped too, and like the sort of discussions they have a different sort of like priority or concept when it's being presented. I'm pretty sure you guys noticed this as well, but the All Lives Matter movement is very popular, not just in the USA, but I think across the globe. So people mistake All Lives Matter for not being racist. Like they easily think that that's like a not racist movement. So like the examples I found were like Hillary Clinton, who used the All Lives Matter phrase. Mike Pence, I know he's Trump's vice president, but his explanation for the use of the phrase sounded like he was not trying to be racist, but thought that All Lives Matter is a non-racist sort of movement. And also, like, I have people around me, members of my family, who think that Black Lives Matter is more racist than All Lives Matter, and even myself, right? Like when I first heard of this All Lives Matter movement, it was a debate motion about the credibility of the All Lives Matter movement. And when I first heard it, I thought the All Lives Matter movement was an improvement on the Black Lives Matter movement, but that was just because I took it at face value. So like only afterwards, when I read about it a bit more, then I understood that, oh yeah, there's something wrong with this movement, and I don't know if we should be giving it all the credit that it gets. So
I mean, it sounds fine, right? Like all lives matter.
the reason why I think they're so popular is like they co-opt a sort of liberal narrative. Do you get what I mean? Like they make themselves sound like they're about equality, even if they don't necessarily believe so. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, in terms of the All Lives Matter movement, I think the wording of the movement itself makes it very hard to attack. So like you can't necessarily say like you disagree with the All Lives Matter movement because like obviously people's lives matter. Like that's like a fact. But like and we'll get into this later. I think it's hard to attack them just because like they take a very basic fact and they kind of like to misdirect arguments to attack that basic fact. So like it's very hard to deny again that all lives matter. So it's quite a hard subject to discuss.
To be honest, I feel like in this scenario, it's a sort of confusion really between two types of sentences. So in linguistics, we learn about this thing called these two types of sentences called locutionary and illocutionary sentences. So an illocutionary sentence is the content of the sentence. So I like cats. I, Yen Dylan Chai, like, enjoy petting and or hugging cats, the small furry animals who live in my house. So that's the literal meaning of the sentence. But the sentences also have this sort of second meaning, where it is not only about the literal content of the sentence, but also what I'm doing when I say the sentence. Let's say someone comes up to me and says, do you like dogs? And I say, I like cats. I'm not really saying I, Yen Dylan Chai, love those small furry animals. I'm saying, actually, I don't like dogs. I actually like cats instead of dogs. All lives matter is correct in its form, right? All lives matter. Every single life matters is correct. But what its double meaning or its second meaning does is it sort of accuses the other side. Actually, we are the ones who really think that all lives matter. And when Black Lives Matter comes up and says Black Lives Matter, what All Lives Matter movement does is it implies that it has a secondary meaning. So actually only Black Lives Matter. That's the implied meaning according to the All Lives Matter people. And as soon as you start to distinguish between what Black Lives Matter is said to mean, or only Black Lives Matter, versus what they're actually saying, up until now, we have been treated as if we don't matter. It is about time we started being treated as if we do. Then a lot of the arguments coming from All Lives Matter starts to break down.
Yeah, so like I think a good parallel is like imagine if you weren't talking about lives and race, but about diseases. So like let's say like one of your family members has terminal level cancer, right? And then some random stranger on the street walks up to your family member and says, all diseases actually matter and all diseases are important. That doesn't sound exactly right, correct? I mean, yeah, true, like all diseases are important and people suffering is bad. But you telling that to someone with terminal stage cancer isn't exactly being sensitive and it's not exactly handling the main problem that they're bringing up, right?
Yeah, so I saw that tweet. I think it was a tweet, wasn't it? Or I know it was like a meme or something because I saw it like on Twitter.
I think it was like a SpongeBob meme. You know the one where SpongeBob's like think his arm.
Okay, we probably got
Is
it
it
from
the one where
different-
like some words are some letters are capitalized, some aren't? Like
Yeah. Is that one?
I like cats. Oh, I like cats. Oh.
I'm not gonna mention like the wording of the meme because I think cancer and diseases are a very serious issue. But yeah, it was roughly along those lines.
A bit weird, huh? Like three of us are getting political education from memes. SpongeBob memes. Like I that has to say something about political education.
It's just you and Sam. I haven't admitted to it yet.
I'll make you admit to it implicitly somewhere in this episode.
Right. So yeah, so Ian actually studies linguistics, so you can sort of take his word on his opinion on the use of language for these movements. And I'm very proud to say that I have something to add onto his linguistics argument. This will be hopefully the first of many. So basically, it assumes that the movement is named only Black Lives Matter, which isn't the case, right?
Oh yeah, fair.
Right. So that's like one reason why All Lives Matter is wrong. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think what All Lives Matter does towards the Black Lives Matter message can be summed up in a technique that it's not really a technique, more like something that's frowned upon in the debate community, and it's called a strawman argument.
Here, Sam makes a reference to what is known as a strawman argument. So, a strawman argument is a fallacy where you sort of take an argument and rebut a worse version of it. So, if Sam comes up to me and says, I like mint chocolate chip because it's cooling, for me to rebut it, I want to take the worst version of that argument and say, cooling is similar to a toothpaste kind of taste. So, I say that Sam's taste in ice cream sucks because he likes the taste of toothpaste. Yeah, so that is basically what a strawman argument is. You take an argument, you form a weaker version of it, and you rebut that instead.
That's untrue.
Yes.
So what this looks like in terms of All Lives Matter and Black Lives Matter is All Lives Matter tries to paint Black Lives Matter's argument as we should only care about African American people's rights and that other people's rights don't matter, or that we should put African American rights on different pedestals. But what Black Lives Matter movement actually wants is to correct racial oppression that's deep set in history. And the only way to do that is to give them more in the present because they've been disadvantaged in the past, right? So All Lives Matter conveniently leaves out the past part of that argument and focuses on the present, and then they point to it and say, look, this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to sideline everyone else. So that's roughly how I think All Lives Matter attacks the Black Lives Matter narrative, or the messaging.
Let's assume that they're correct, and that all lives really do matter. No, I'm kidding. Let's assume that they were correct, and white people were truly getting shot at the equal rates as black people, if not more. Or let's assume that black people really are just whining about it. It really is mostly white people being shot by the police. The question is then, why don't they care even more than the black people? Like, if let's say the problem that All Lives Matter has about the Black Lives Matter movement is, you're only really looking at 20% of the picture. Actually, the problem's like 5 times worse. Why aren't they campaigning 5 times harder? Why aren't they spending 5 times more money on lobbying politicians to come up with a problem to the issue of police brutality that affects all races, assuming that it does, right? And once you realize that is sort of the logical endpoint of the arguments, not that we should do nothing, but that we should be doing even more, it then looks really suspicious that their solution is the problem's actually way worse. However, we must do nothing.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't quite gel.
All Lives Matter should technically include Black Lives Matter as part of its narrative, right? Logically. But it doesn't,
and they should be,
for some reason.
Yeah. They should be fighting Asians also, white people also, Latinos also, and they'll be fighting for every other race as well, fighting doubly hard. And so that sort of casts, and I'm not saying this to be mean, but it's what I think. It casts a doubtful light on whether they really mean what they say, It seems like, given that they're not doing this, and given that they're not fighting 10 times or 20 times harder, their problem isn't really that Black Lives Matter isn't adequately capturing the problem. The problem seems to be that Black Lives Matter has the audacity to even talk about it at all. And it seems to be more of a distraction than any sort of proper argument. So all debaters, that's how you do a steelman argument.
Wow, okay.
or how you
Throwing
streamline an
some
argument.
debate advice. But yeah,
Yes,
I think
yes.
that segues nicely into like actually like what sort of people comprise these sorts of like counter movements, and like whether or not there's some validity in the arguments that they put forward, right? Like, Pardon, what do you think?
So yeah, like relating back to how All Lives Matter is really catchy. Like the phrase is really catchy. Linguistically, it's catchier than Black Lives Matter. I don't know. Um, so like we had a bit of a discussion, like a little chat about it yesterday on our WhatsApp group chat, and you noted that 70% of like the All Lives Matter movement are genuinely confused. So like I think that's like the amount, the proportion of people who like think All Lives Matter is not racist or is the less racist of the two, right?
To be clear, that's just like let's assume, for example, that 70%. I don't actually
Yeah,
they're not
yeah.
actually polls, you know.
It's not exactly statistics, but
We
like
aren't statisticians.
yeah, none of us do maths.
Let's just pretend, you know.
Yeah, none of us do maths, right?
So you
Aaron
would
got a
imagine
B in math.
no. The
That's
Shut
because
up!
he
I
got an
got
A star.
of all of my 4 subjects, maths is my A star. Okay, shut up. So we will leave it at that, and then
you're being graded on the bell curve with white people.
does that make us
Never
racist?
mind.
Implicit.
Actually,
yeah,
that's a
watch
very
out.
interesting question. The idea of internalized stereotypes of the model minority is definitely a conversation we can get into next time. For the most part, I don't mean it. White people, y'all are very smart, very good. Please don't colonize us again. Let's see. How
He's
is that
saying that
going?
now, but in his Oxford interview, then you watch out.
Yeah, we'll see how much you suck up to the people in the UK when you apply for universities over there. So I just have like one thing to add onto like
I would
why.
like to plead the fifth.
Yeah, I'll lock you up lah. So I have one thing to add to the conversation why All Lives Matter is generally wrong. So it's mostly just going to be echoing the content of an article that I read recently. So basically, I've had this article on my reading list for a long time, and I never read it until we had to prepare for this episode, because being a
Easy
future being a future law student, I obviously do not read a lot. Also, I think that stereotype is wrong. Like, how like old aunties, when they see you holding a book, they'll be like, "Oh, you must want to be a lawyer in the future because you read a lot." That's a lie. Like, I can show you any medical textbook. It's a lot thicker, or at least as thick as the a law textbook. Anyways, I'm going off track again.
It has pictures.
Yes, that's true. It has pictures. That's like one good thing about medical textbooks. Like you actually get to see a human body.
Imagine a law textbook with pictures. If he punches you here, it's illegal. If he punches you here, it's okay.
I think
like, you transition from like petty theft, then the next page there's just like graphic shooting of someone. Like,
Theft is illegal. Flip over for reference. And it has like a guy reaching into an old lady's purse. If you ever see this, call the police. You are now a good lawyer.
Oh, dude, that would make studying law a lot more fun and less stressful. Yeah. So, okay,
This is the judge.
can I finally talk about the article I read?
Yes.
Right. So the article was titled "The Philosophical Flaw in Saying All Lives Matter." So the first point it brought up is that we often use slogans that don't necessarily reflect the truth. So examples of this would be like "girls can do anything" and pride parades. So like girls can do anything is it's aspirational in nature. We want girls to be able to do anything, even though it's not necessarily true given like societal constructs and all that nonsense. I know you wanted to say something.
No, it feels like something Ben Shapiro would rebut, like, girls can do anything. Can they fly me to the moon? See, gotcha.
Yeah, so basically the same principle applies to like pride parades, right? So like when people march out on pride parades, they don't necessarily have to be proud, right? They might have like internalized oppression and all of that, and they just go out there because they want to be proud rather than actually being proud of who they are. So the Malaysian version of this is Budi Bahasa Budaya Kita. My Malay pronunciation out window. So let me try that again. Budi Bahasa Budaya Kita. Okay, much better. So what this basically means in English is that like how to say sopan in English? Being nice, saying nice
Polite.
things.
Polite.
Being polite. Being polite
my
is
Don't
our
worry,
God.
it's
culture.
okay. It's okay. You keep
Look at this
trying, you'll learn
whitewashing.
English. We believe in you, Karan.
Dude, I said what is sopan in English. That means my doesn't that mean my Malay is better than my
That means
English?
his BM is cacat.
No
Okay,
lah, I
fine.
just
Don't worry,
can't draw
Karan.
the links.
One of these days, you'll learn English and Malay.
Okay. So basically, like this slogan that the government used to push a lot harder a long time ago says that politeness is in our culture. It's not necessarily true. I think in Malaysia, we have one of the widest varieties of cuss words any nation could hope for. Part of growing
Can we
up
give a
is
list?
learning. No, we will not make a list,
Never mind.
but growing up,
We've saw
learning
before.
the
It's like
cuss words.
it's like might as well go down the slippery slope.
We can basically write an essay. Wala. We can compile like a tweet is
Karan's
not
job
long
to bleep
enough.
this out anyways.
A tweet is not long enough to
A
describe.
thread.
A thread, of course, you can put in you can write in your entire
One
thesis
out
in a
of
thread.
300.
Yeah. So basically, the point is, like, throughout childhood, one of the main things Malaysian childhood is unique for is that we grow up learning the cuss words in so many different languages, and it's not necessarily in our culture to be polite. Like when we meet our friends, we like casually flip them off. We say, "F you," and like. So the point I'm making with all of this is that slogans don't necessarily have to be true, but the use of them is aspirational so as to spark the conversations that hopefully lead to these events becoming true, right? So we say girls can do anything so that we can inspire girls to want to do anything. We have pride parades because we want people to be proud of who they are inside rather than having to push it all in. And the government says politeness is in our
Yeah.
culture because they want us to be polite, which sort of contrasts a little bit with like the conversations they have in parliament.
Yeah, and like an interesting thing is like usually the literal meaning cancels out the implied meaning. So saying that girls can do anything, if you say literally, then there shouldn't be any action done to help girls do stuff because like they can do anything. But the implied meaning is that girls can do anything so that we can instill in them the motivation to try and do something because they've been disadvantaged for years, because they've been locked into being mothers and they think that that's the only way to be a good woman in their society. See, like the literal meaning ends up cancelling out what you actually want to achieve with the implied meaning. So yeah, I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah. So like what the article says is key to understanding slogans is to evaluate the context with which they are used. So if we say girls can do anything, we have to look at how girls are being treated in our own country or in our own society. So this is where we talk about like specifically what Black Lives Matter aims to do. Firstly, it points out an injustice. So it exists in a world where there is injustice, right? So Black lives don't matter as much as other lives to certain social institutions. So we have the criminal justice system, your courts, your police, the laws, all of them, they system like disproportionately impact Black people in America. Education doesn't exactly help all races equally. Like we have underdeveloped areas where there is like a higher percentage of Black people living there, and then those areas don't have as good education or facilities as like other more urbanized areas, for example. So, God, Siri. So, like the statistics I have on this, like I'm lifting it directly from the text. In the UK, Black people are 5 times more likely to die in childbirth than white people, and Black infant mortality is twice as high. Black people are twice as likely as white people to be unemployed, and almost half of Black households live in poverty. Black people are 10 times more likely to be stopped and searched than white people, and 4 times more likely to be arrested. They constitute 3% of the population, but 8% of deaths in police custody. Black lives are deplorably undervalued. So, with this context in mind, like all of these statistics, it shows that there is an like Black lives are undervalued according to social institutions that exist. So with that context, saying Black Lives Matter is in opposition to what the injustice that happens in status quo. And saying Black Lives Matter is a way of directing attention to where it's needed, right? So also, one note, uh, our mutual disagrees with these statistics that we use, right? So like I just gave that really long, boring paragraph, and he says that what about this like stats that show that white people get shot as well, and that black people are just shot more because they commit more crimes, and apparently that's the rebuttal to like the Black Lives Matter movement. But like
Yeah. He mentioned white slavery or something in the Ottoman Empire.
they mention white slavery, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. He was like, there's more white slaves. Like, there's more white slaves, so like policemen can be violent towards black people.
Yeah, so like I think like by the way, all statistics need to come with interpretation. Like an argument is both facts and narrative. You have to use both. So if the facts are that black people are more likely to commit crimes, the question we should ask is why, right? Like maybe they are more likely to be, they are poorer than white people, but why is that? Is that because we like discriminate when we hire, or because job opportunities aren't available for them, or
Slavery.
yes, but like I mean slavery is not formal anymore. You can argue that the 13th Amendment is a form of slavery or something. uh, or like there's also a big argument to be made on how capitalism is racist. uh, yeah, so like when you look at like a statistic, you should also sort of like think about what does this mean, rather than taking it at face value and saying that, oh yeah, that's fine, yeah, Black Lives Matter is wrong. You don't just read a text and see that says like black people are more likely to commit crimes, but without questioning it even further. So the way I interpret it is like they commit crimes because the system is racist and it compels them to commit a crime. It's the same with any other crime. Like people only commit crimes because they're pushed to, at least more often than not. They commit crimes because they have to. They're poor, they need money, they need to survive. They're stuck in a loop of doing it over and over again.
It comes back to the idea of why aren't you then fighting harder then, right?
Mm.
Like, because there are two possible angles with which a white supremacist or anti-racist could engage with this idea of statistics showing black people are disadvantaged. Either A, they're not really disadvantaged, or B, they are disadvantaged not by any white people or by any systems, but because of their own character. The first, and they're not, and white people, not white people, anti-racists tend to dance between the two. Really, they're not really mutually inclusive. It's sort of a contradiction to argue both, but they will do it anyways a lot of the times, right? When they get proven wrong on one, they'll dance to the next. For the first one, black people aren't really disadvantaged. They are usually unable to contest the statistics, although some have just said, yeah, they're lying about the statistics, in which case, it's just really hard to disprove them. If they're literal, if nothing can disprove them, then there's nothing you can really do. But more often than not, they'll do things like, oh, actually, white people are disadvantaged in this other area, for example. So that's like saying, people who are not in wheelchairs get shot even more than people who are in wheelchairs. Therefore, it's not a problem. It's like, yeah, but like fewer people are in wheelchairs, for example. I suppose that's like in an alternate
What do you
universe
have
where
against
police
people in wheelchairs, dude?
I don't know. Like, let's assume that the police were disproportionately finding people in wheelchairs and like using them for target practice because they're slower or something.
Dude, that's a bit ableist, but okay, cool. Let's move on.
I'm not saying that that's what actually happens.
I sort of told Ian and Sam about this question that I wanted to ask them because I have sort of an opinion about it. I cannot say I'm right about this, obviously. Like most political opinions, they are never completely correct, at least. So my question was, are you racist if you disagree with some aspects of the Black Lives Matter movement? So the same applies to like any other movement. If you disagree with the way a movement happens, or like with the movement, if you disagree with the movement, are you then against the cause? Sort of like that kind of question. So my problem with it is that the Black Lives Matter movement does advocate for some level of civil disobedience. And I'm not so sure where I stand on that. Like, I know there are so many arguments on that. Civil disobedience is justified. So by civil disobedience, I mean like rioting, looting stores. Jake Paul took a video of him stealing some alcohol, and then he got like into some trouble for that. Yeah, some nonsense. So I don't know where do I stand on violence as a means to an end. I'm perfectly comfortable making arguments for it, but like as a personal decision, I don't know if I'm okay with violence in order to reach a certain goal. And I know that a lot of people oppose Black Lives Matter on this stance, right? Because you are looting random people's shops who aren't necessarily complicit in the amount of racism that goes on. And even if they are, the amount of damage that you're inflicting on them isn't exactly proportional to the harm they caused. So if like, to put it simply, I've seen videos of black shop owners crying because their stores got looted as well. And when I think of that kind of violence that isn't targeted and isn't proportional, I don't know whether I fully support Black Lives Matter on that stance. But I don't know if that makes me a racist. So that's like the kind of question that I have.
Okay. I think I'll take this one. So about the store owners and all that. First we have to ask ourselves: is it Black Lives Matter who is doing that? Because this is where the information sinkhole becomes a big problem, right? Reporting about this kind of thing is really difficult because you don't have reporters following people around at all times, and when they do, they're often arrested by the police, as we've seen from videos of reporters being literally shot, arrested, pushed to the ground, their cameras taken away, etc. But but you also have, so what we are really working off of for the podcast, or for really anyone else, is just videos released. But you also see videos released of policemen essentially who were implanted and who are not part of the community, vandalizing things, hurting people, and they sort of pretend to be part of the protest, but they're not really doing this sort of really terrible thing to the community. And you always hear reports of how the community will actively avoid like local black store owners because they know it's not them who are racist. It is usually Target, for example. So the question of whether or not it is Black Lives Matter who is even going after your SMEs or your small medium enterprises or basically your regular shop owners really is a big question also. But as for the bigger philosophical idea of violence, I think that there is a very interesting conversation to have, because I can point out violence is always used as a means to an end in every society. In order to have a police force, you need to legitimize violence towards your society at all points in life, right? Like there's a story of a guy who says, "I prefer not to." Like he just one day wakes up and goes, "I'm just not going to do anything," and so he doesn't go to work, and so his boss calls him and says, "I want to come. I prefer not to go to work." And he cannot pay rent, and his landlord's telling, "Get out of my house. I prefer not to." And he eventually ends up in jail where he's being told, "You need to call a lawyer. I prefer not to." And so it really points out how we're always under threat of violence. Really, we're just narrowly avoiding it by paying rent, going to work, not going to jail. And even in jail, if we just sat down and said, "I prefer not to go to the next cell," we'd be beaten up by the warden. So violence is always there in every society, to every single person, except for the rich, of course. But that's another story. And as long as you support having a police force or a jail system or an army, violence is always legitimized towards people as a means to an end, whether that end be upholding the law, fulfilling geopolitical interests or protecting your people, although it's not always about protection, but we'll get to that in a war episode if we ever do one. And so the question of, this is a question of which violence is more justified. It's always a question of on the spectrum, not justified at all. So randomly shooting a black person versus very justified. And that might be, overthrowing a unjust tyrant or a monarch, for example. And so it's the question of where Black Lives Matter falls on that spectrum, if they even fall at all.
Right. So I literally just thought about this, but like more specifically to like whether you can like go against a movement but still support a cause. Like the sort of parallel I drew in my head. I don't know how accurate this is because I didn't really think this through. Like it just came while you were talking. But anyways, like the parallel that I was thinking of was Israel and Palestine. So I am for sort of like I'm against Israel and what they do with like their forceful moving of people and everything. Like I've watched videos of like they recently cut the amount of power that Palestine gets a day. Like now they only have 4 hours of power a day. So I am for like Palestinian liberation, but I may not like be supportive of Hamas, for example. Like I don't support like the methods in which they want to achieve Palestinian liberation. I don't support like the amount of violence and war, conflicts, shooting each other, throwing bombs, rockets, and all that. But I do support their cause. Like I understand where they're coming from. I understand how much they suffer. Well, I don't fully understand how much they suffer, but I can sympathize, and I can still be for their cause. I can still donate to like Palestinians, and in hopes that better things will come for them. But it doesn't necessarily mean I have to support like Hamas. I guess I don't know how good of a parallel this is, but that's what I thought of.
There's also always the haunting specter of anti-Semitism whenever we talk about Israel and Palestine. Like whenever we say things like, I believe that Israel as a state either should not exist or should learn to coexist with Palestine as a legitimate state. There's always the question of, are you anti-Semitic?
Yeah, so
and-
we're gonna talk about like states in the next episode, viability of states and all that. So yeah, if you're interested in that.
Hey, it's
Yeah.
31st August.
Oh yeah, right.
Mm.
But yeah, that's
For context, 31st August is Malaysia Day for international listeners.
you really
Is
think
that-
we're gonna get international readers?
No, wait.
Listeners.
Stop.
Isn't it Independence Day? Malaysia Day is September, no?
Hey, wait, no, sorry, yes. Oh, wow. Man.
Dude,
Kuala
you
Lumpur
Malaysian
has
or what?
brainwashed me.
No, he's
Yeah,
Chinese.
Kuala Lumpur has brainwashed me. Okay, yeah.
So,
So 31st
technically-
August is, yeah, 31st August is
Just
uh,
thumbed up your own
what,
like
Independence
you just
Day, right?
thumbed up your own call of pendatang.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'll go back in my boat. Yeah. Go back to, where's the Hokkien's? Guangzhou, is it? Somewhere in China. lah.
Oh yeah. We can feel the love for China there. Somewhere in China. Not a big sample size at all.
Okay, yeah. I think one question that's quite important, I think, is like obviously some parts of like counter movements like make sense and can hold their own, right? So for example, the like cases of males being raped and how they're not addressed properly because people don't think, male people can get raped. Or men can get raped. I'm trying to read. Yeah, so they don't think men can get raped. So like obviously like these claims hold some validity, right? Like it's true, it is an issue. So how do we deal with that in the future going forward if we say that like these counter movements are immoral in nature?
Yeah. So I'm gonna relate a bit to what Ian said earlier on that like so we see this in all movements, right? So for men's rights activists, some of them are very anti-feminist, but some of them have legitimate claims. So I know that like some men's rights groups, like for example the incel movement, you can immediately put them on one side like of a table. Like if you put all of your movements on a table and you're looking at men's rights, you can put
Gross, not
incel.
gross.
Yeah, you can put incel to the side that's closest to the bin, and like the ones that talk about male rape, the ones that talk about divorce laws,
Male suicide.
probably male suicide, yeah. And also like I think there were some legal arguments on how there's a criminal bias against men compared to women. Like men are more likely, like this is probably statistically true. So like the legitimate claims, we have to sort of learn to put them to one side, and like the more unfair claims like incelibate, like the involuntary celibate movement, like they demand women have sex with them because I want to have sex. Yeah, those kind of
Worse than
movements we
that,
put.
yeah.
Yeah. I know. Like the
I
incel
think-
movement have killed people in the past, so they're a lot worse than that for sure.
I think it depends largely on what they're trying to do, really. Like some are legit. Like as I said before, if you take a movement or a group of people, you're bound to have people who are just doing it for different intents, right? Like if you notice, being shitty is a really good strategy in live debates, like in real world debate arguments, right? Where, it takes 20 minutes for us to disprove the claim all lives matter in a nuanced and hopefully intelligent and analytical manner. A racist guy just has to say it like once, and the people are going, yeah, that's true. And then we have to give this long explanation all the way back to slavery about how they are actually mistaken. A lot of the times they don't legitimately believe, actually, I believe that all lives matter. They just want us to dance for them like monkeys. Like, they just want to make the liberals pissed. And they just want to, convince onlookers, can't you see I'm making them dance, and can't you see I'm sounding right? And the moment we finish our long nuanced explanation and go, see, therefore you are actually mistaken about your first point. They come up with the second one and go, yes, however, black people are, criminals. And then we have to give long nuanced explanation of that. And it then gets, so whether or not we should take them seriously or not, a lot of the times depends on whether they are legitimately mistaken or not, or they're just trying to make liberals dance. It always depends on, well, of course, intent and the type of person we're talking about.
We'll probably talk a lot more about this in a future episode about activism that isn't planned yet, but it's probably going to be in the works. So stay tuned.
Yeah, we're referencing a lot of future episodes here.
Yeah, man. Signposting is amazing.
Yes, until next week when we actually get arrested after our next week's episode.
Well, yeah. So, yeah. I think that's all we've got for today. Like, Ian has to study soon.
He's got exams because he's a nerd.
I've got exams because I actually am in school.
Actually, Sam and I, we have a mamak to crash. So while Ian studies, Sam and I will go and enjoy Maggi Goreng. Yeah. So I think that's all we've got for today. I am probably going to write another blog post about this. It's probably going to be about reverse racism, or the fact that we can separate a movement from a cause. The argument if we can separate a movement from a cause. So as usual, I'll put the link to the description wherever you're listening to this from. Whatever. English is not my strongest suit. That's all we have for today. So everybody say bye. Bye. Like little kids.
Anjing, hai kawan-kawan, diam di sanjit.